Got him. I'm on roof still. Two. Two of them. Because it's just two people. Everybody suck. Trios or quads? How do I find a lobby? There we go. All right.
Resurgence. Survive to redeploy fallen teammates. Kill to bring them back faster. High priority contract is available. Check your attack map for objective location. All right, we got you started. You finished the job. Enemies are dropping into the area. Watch the sky. Down one squad mate.
Put myself up!
Redeploy faster.
I'm lagging like a bitch. Why our teammates leave like some hoes?
Enemies deployed a counter UAV.
Remy. Got a gun? Good.
Bro,
Hostile mosquito is online.
Throwing grenade!
Hostile deployed a mosquito. Hostile mosquito is online.
oh, this smoke is not ours.
Hostile deployed
No.
a mosquito.
What is this red shit?
I boosted.
I need rockets!
Enemy soldier incoming.
Oh, I just did him
On your
dirty.
attack map. Go get hunting. $25 remaining.
I'm in the bad spot. Up.
Just jump from up there.
Somebody might be first. I don't know.
Bro, why am I lagging?
Ram.
Fire!
That was smart.
Campeta arriba, brother.
Hostile counter UAV overhead.
First.
Mira. Ven arriba.
Enemies dropping into the AO.
Alright, one more.
Kill.
Red
Marking the rest of
neutralized!
that squad on
Clear!
your attack map. Get hunting. Down
I
to
think
you,
I landed
soldier.
in and still
Stay sharp. Hostile Guardian has been deployed.
Lo maté. Por ahí
Ok,
otro más.
vas a subir, ¿qué vas a hacer?
Your squad mate's back on station.
Juan,
Good work.
What is it? Trios? Oh yeah, it is. It is. It is. It's quads actually.
Quads.
I'm tripped. I'm like, yo. I'm like, none of these niggas see each other.
We are returning you to the front. Earn this. Hostiles deployed a mosquito.
Fuck. I forgot.
Enemies are dropping into the area. Watch the skies.
Over here. That's you. Why am I lagging, bro?
Hostile Guardian is
Told you,
active.
bro, quads, man. You say you want to play with other people. We playing with people with no connections.
Loadout drop headed your way.
Then they left. They probably lagged out. They holding.
Marked our field upgrade.
Why is my shit like blurry? What's
Keep
going
boosting
on?
you.
He what?
Boosting you.
What does that mean?
It's a battle rage. If I'm near you and I hit the little inhaler, you get it too. It's faster,
okay.
health regen, da 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 da. You know. He went up the hill. Just seen it.
Nah, I gotta make this jump, bro. Never mind.
Enemy movement.
I don't know if you saw that.
No shield on top of prison. Where'd you go?
Oh.
Enemy
Going back behind that
movement.
wall to the left.
Moving here.
Yeah, he's getting shot at, or he's shooting at somebody else.
Throwing grenade.
Hit him. Pulling back.
Throwing grenade.
Oh
It's
my
all on
god,
you.
bro.
Stay alive so your squad can redeploy.
Nice shot.
People who lay down are such pussies, bro. What?
Enemy soldier incoming. You got reinforcements
jump.
inbound. All right, your squad's in the safe zone.
Unloaded.
What'd you say?
Loaded.
Ammo here. Throwing grenade. I'm hit.
Oh, behind us, behind us, behind us.
Yeah, I just got fucked up. Let me know if you jump.
I'm not, but I feel like there's dudes coming up these stairs.
Hostile mosquito is online.
Laser me.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm not gonna fight that.
Yeah, he's coming. He's coming. Coming. One close. Close.
I played that so stupid, bro.
Standing. Failure ain't fatal. It's just an
I played that so
opportunity to do
fucking
better.
stupid. I should have just
You
fucking
see
waited.
this laser?
I did see the laser. I tried to fucking play it. You could possibly play it while plays.
Try to invite Colin again.
I'll be right back, though. I'll be back, bro. I'll be back in like 15, 20 minutes.
All right. All right. See what we got.
Why did I decide to build an online university? Well,
there is a crisis now.
I think she wanted, if the church says,
we still enjoy an incredible level strength of the.
you're going to put your life on the line. You want.
We still enjoy an incredible level of privilege
what's up,
and wealth, and that is fragile. We can never take that for granted, and part of not taking that for granted is that we are part of a very complicated global system. All these things that are important to us as Canadians, both domestically or internationally, are premised on a secure global system. That system is under threat, but it is real.
How you know I'm in
and
here?
It is coming.
I don't know. I just had a feeling.
Hey, everybody. So today we're doing a bit of a dive into the state of the Canadian military. And it's not just that, because it's also a deep dive into the state of the Canadian political situation. And then more broadly, I would say somewhat of an analysis of a very important fragment of the culture war, which is, let's say, the relationship between postmodernism and critical race theory and DEI equity.
I'm eating, I'll be on
nonsense,
later.
And the most patriarchal
that's a bit.
of all institutions, the military. And so it's an issue of broad international significance with a Canadian focus. There's a bit of a crisis in the Canadian military, especially with regards to personnel retention and recruitment. And that's emblematic of a much deeper problem. And so we're going to dive into that problem. It's taken me a while, but I found some people from the Canadian military who are willing and able to speak. Mark Norman from the Navy, Michelle Maisonneuve from the Army, and Barbara Krasich-Maisonneuve from the Air Force. And so we're all going to talk today about the crisis that's facing the Canadian military and perhaps the military elsewhere, and why the military in Canada is necessary and what role it's going to play in the future, and what problems it's suffering from that can't be, let's say, easily gathered under the rubric of DEI emergency, because perhaps that's the last of the serious problems that's truly facing the Canadian military. Let's start, sir. Will you introduce yourself, and I'll go through all three of you, and away we'll go.
Thanks, Dr. Peterson, for having me and the rest of us here. My name is Mark Norman. I'm a retired naval officer, third generation Canadian military officer. I served 39 years in the Royal Canadian Navy, starting as a reservist mechanic and rising through the ranks, having a whole bunch of great opportunities to do a bunch of really fun and some not so fun things over that career. I retired in 2019 after having commanded the Navy itself, the actual institution of the Royal Canadian Navy as part of the Canadian Forces, and a brief tour as the Vice Chief of Defence Staff, the second in command of the Canadian Forces. And since then, I've been doing a variety of different things in the private sector and trying to push the narrative and open discussion and dialogue about defense and security issues in Canada. So I really appreciate being invited here today. Thanks.
Sure.
So I'm Michel Maisonneuve. I served 35 years in the Army, Canadian Army, and I was an Armored Corps officer, so tanker. Went through military college in Kingston, and then I finished my last job in uniform was as the Chief of Staff of the NATO headquarters in Norfolk, Virginia. Which we stood up after it changed from being a naval headquarters to a transformation headquarters. Once I removed the uniform, I moved to the civilian service, the civilian national defense, and I was appointed the academic director, the principal of the military college in Saint-Jean, which was reopened in 2007. Did that for 10 and a half years, and we actually, by the time I left, we got it back up to university level. And so retired completely from both those jobs in 2018, and since then I've been speaking out as well about the state of our, not just the armed forces, but our country, and ended up, anyway, so that's been kind of the amount of work that I've been doing in the last few years.
My name is Barbara Krasi-Maisonneuve, and I served for 21 years in the Royal Canadian Air Force. And I started in the early 80s. I did not join as an officer. I joined as a private with the military police, a trade that women had only been allowed in for a few years. And then I was fortunate enough to go to the Royal Military College and Royal Roads. And then I became an officer in the logistics branch. And I served in incredibly amazing places, and I feel very blessed. I retired, as I said, after 21 years. Then I spent 2 years in the procurement world. And since then, I feel that I would still like to give back. So I do various nonprofit. I work with the Canadian Warplane Heritage Museum. And pretty much since the whole sexual harassment thing broke in the military, I have wanted to tell, you know, my side of the story, and I think I speak for the majority, but there's very few people that are willing to listen. So I really appreciate being here, Dr. Pearson, to be able to have a chance to do that.
Thanks for having us.
Oh yeah,
Thank you.
Well, I'm thrilled that you're here. It's a real privilege to be able to discuss these things and to come to, I hope, some deeper understanding. Well, let's start with the 20,000-foot view. I think I definitely want to delve into the issues of sexual harassment and hypothetical sexual misconduct in the military. And also I'd like to talk about the role of women in the military in a very frank way. And so, because that's a very complicated problem. But let's start with the state of the military in Canada in 2024. And Mark, maybe we'll start with you if you don't mind. So what issues do you think are paramount and that paramount also in a manner that bringing to public attention would be useful?
Yeah, I think it would not be an overstatement to describe the Canadian Armed Forces as being in a crisis. And that crisis has many dimensions to it. And it is a very complicated equation, to use a mathematical analogy. There is no one single thing that it either stands out as being problematic and by definition, wicked problems. As soon as you start to mess with one element of that equation, you throw the other elements out of bounds. So that's the context for my answer, which would be that we have at least 3 or 4 significant strategic challenges, starting outside and looking in. First of all, we live in a country that traditionally has not really understood, although it accepts the need for an armed forces, it doesn't understand why an armed forces is necessary, and those are 2 different conversations. The global security situation we find ourselves in is eroding rapidly. And this is another aspect of what I would describe as, it's not a naivete on the part of Canadians writ large, but it is a sense of it's not really affecting us on the part of machinery of government. We have an organization that has been chronically underfunded and undersupported for decades. This is both episodic but constant over my friends here would agree. We have a human resources problem, both in terms of quantity and quality, where there are more people, there have been until recently, more people leaving the armed forces than joining it. The institution is shrinking, and there are issues around the quality of individuals that are being brought into the organization. So we have a quantitative and qualitative problem that relates to the strength of the armed forces. And then, as you mentioned in your introduction, we have broader issues with respect to equipment, purchase, procurement, maintenance, and these are all combining to create what I believe is a human crisis. And then add to that external concerns around the credibility, not of the individual soldier, sailor, or aviator inside the armed forces, but of the institution. Can it actually do what it's required to do? Is it credible? Is it reliable on an international level? And this goes right to at the grand strategic level, is Canada really supporting its military the way it should? And with the 2% argument, all these things right down to is Canada really there to help the alliance and other key allies, and can it be reliable? And I think that this is kind of a messy melange of really significant concerns going forward.
Okay, so let me take some of that apart, and then we'll go to...
Keep juking me out. I keep thinking he's gonna fuck me up.
Let's start with the hard one. So let's say that I'm being a realist and a cynic. And I might say, well, why can't Canada merely ride on the coattails of the U.S.? 10 times our population, much stronger economy, outstanding military. They're going to defend Canada when push comes to shove. We're adding a relatively small contribution, even if we pulled our fair share, pulled our weight, we'd be adding a relatively small contribution. And given the proximity of the Americans and the fact that we're under their defense rubric, why not just attend to other things and let the military shuffle along? Now that goes to your point about being underfunded and under-supported. You'd be able to, let's say, you'd be able to get away with that, so to speak, but you could make a case if you felt like it that was a very pragmatic thing to do, given that we have the Americans on our doorstep. So what
I hate these things.
a counter argument to that, one might be, well, you can't play games with your primary military ally without paying a price for that. So Canada should pull its weight, not least so that our opinion is given some weight. And then I guess you'd make the same case internationally if we're not pulling our weight on the military side. And with regard to our international agreements, why should anyone take us with any degree of seriousness, including ourselves? And I think we've seen that already.
Fucking hate them
massive erosion in the perception of Canada's reliability on the international front. I don't think Canadians have any idea how badly this government has devastated Canada's international reputation. Hardly on the military side, but that's not the only reason. Okay, so what else would... Yes.
Before you go on, if I may, I agree with everything that Mark said. I see it as it's a perfect storm.
Mm-hmm.
The international security environment has completely changed.
Right.
We never thought we'd ever have a state-on-state war again. There's a situation in Gaza, of course.
Yeah.
There are rogue nations out there that are trying economically and in a lot of other ways, eventually perhaps militarily, are going to try to have the upper hand. So the international situation is forcing people across the world to look at their security situation. So that's a huge thing. At the same time, as Mark said, there are all these issues within Canada, within the Canadian forces, that are making it, currently we are undefended, if I can just say. In my view, we are undefended. The NORAD agreement took too long to get upgraded, so now, okay, they've made the decision to do that. And that is now having an impact, as you say, in our standing in the world. And I think one of the things that Canadians don't understand in terms of the importance of armed forces is that they are a means for us to demonstrate our involvement. A ship, for example, when a ship goes off and docks somewhere in any country, they're the greatest diplomatic tool that we can have, because they're there to demonstrate Canada's there. Our sailors are fantastic diplomats. They get out there and they talk about what they do. They talk about their country. They spend money in the economy of that country that they're visiting.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so that's just a small role, but it's an important one. And as you say, right now, because we have not been supporting our armed forces, they're unsupported, they're underappreciated, they're, you know, so...
What do you think that does to the...
They feel underappreciated, which is...
Yeah,
and you know, they're smart, motivated, patriotic people for the most part who really love what they do, and they're doing it because they genuinely believe in it. And when they see that there is not the level of support, both politically, nationally, and even inside the institution itself,
Yeah.
then that becomes
Demoralizing.
it
go
is
this way.
demoralizing.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
And
if you're
you
going to
can
put your
see
life
it.
on the line, you want to make sure that people are behind you.
I probably want
Right.
to go that way.
So Mike's intervention was really good for two reasons. One, he made a couple of really good points and gave me a chance to think about how to respond
I don't got
to
no arrows.
your question. I think you laid out some of the elements of the answer in your own question, in that back to the essence of why not? Why not just, let the Americans look after us?
Yeah.
We have done that brilliantly for decades.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's an overstatement at all. In fact, I could be somewhat provocative and say that all of these governments, up to and including the current government, that have played this game have done so brilliantly. The problem
reach
is they've done so in a very short-term micro
hell no.
view without understanding the implications of what they're doing. So in terms of the state of the institution, which some are more concerned
that's not
about than
doing it.
others, we can come back to that, but more so to do with Canada's reputation. And what's happening now is not just the global security situation, but the expectations have changed. We're now in a world where it is not just, security is not just a finite, discrete activity. It permeates a whole bunch of different dimensions of how nations and individuals, and whether they're rogue states or whether they're organizations that are pan-national, how they're interacting. And it's not just the traditional physical notion of the military.
Right.
Security has far broader
fucking me.
implications, which means that you need to be looking at it more seriously, more strategically, and looking at all the elements. So the military is a key component of that, because it is, in essence, the insurance policy. It is an overly simplistic characterization, but it's true. Now, a lot of people don't have the luxury of insurance for a variety of reasons, but ultimately,
Yeah, but we could afford that. We're not a poor country.
Yeah.
we are not a poor country, and we have basically traded one degree of opportunity for another. And I'll be honest, we have underfunded defense and security and other infrastructure, a whole variety of things nationally, because we have believed that two things that are now fundamentally flawed. The first one is that there isn't really, it's a threat versus consequence conversation. The probability of something happening is really, really low, and therefore there are other higher probability problems that need to be addressed. And the second one is the very premise of your question, which was that the United States will always look after us. Well, the United States is basically saying, look, yeah, we're partners here, but you are not living up to your obligations with respect to the expectations of the partnership.
The U.S. have noticed now.
Oh yeah, they're
You know,
paying-
they knew it.
Well, Trump
go this way.
definitely noticed.
Well,
and now we've got members of the Senate publicly
Yeah, right.
calling out the government of Canada in an open letter. That doesn't happen by accident.
It would be easy to toss all of your discipline to the side for the summer, but a life of greatness doesn't happen by taking the easy route. The Hallow app offers an incredible range of guided meditations and prayers, which are designed to help you deepen your spirituality and strengthen your connection to God. For the third year in a row, Hallowed is having their wildly popular Saints in 7 Days prayer challenge, where over the course of 4 weeks, you'll journey through the life of an incredible saint, learning more about their faith, story, and ultimate surrender to the will of God in their life. The challenge will kick off August 5th with Joe Mazzulla, the coach of the Celtics, and Saint Sebastian, the patron saint of athletes. Then, Ria Wahlberg will lead meditations on the life of Saint Elizabeth Seton, followed by Jonathan Rumi walking through the powerful story of Saint Maximilian Kolbe, who sacrificed his own life for the life of another at Auschwitz. Closing the series with Father David Michael Moses and Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati. Saints in 7 Days goes deep into the lesser-known parts of a saint's life to show that while their journeys to sainthood were filled with God's grace and glory, they also included human struggles, great suffering, mistakes, and a profound need for God's mercy. Download the Hallow app today at hallow.com/Jordan for an exclusive 3-month trial. That's hallow.com/Jordan.
Oh, this is weird.
And Mike, you said something very interesting
hammer.
in relationship to Mark's comments too. You talked about us being undefended. So let me expand that a little bit. So it isn't obvious to me anymore exactly where the prime military threat is. And so what that would mean from a staffing perspective is that you'd want to have the smartest and most alert possible people in your defense team continually reevaluating the shifting landscape to figure out where the threats are. So, and obviously cybersecurity is a walloping element of that, and that is really a whole new kind of warfare. And I would say as well that the emergence of these cheap drones has also, God only knows how radically that's changed the situation. So, because they're unbelievably inexpensive. And so that's a real problem when you send hordes of them against unbelievably expensive military equipment. So what would you say? We've already agreed to some degree that the terminology for the situation that faces the Canadian military is something approximating a crisis. You laid out 4 or 5 reasons why.
Crisis, a perfect storm. It's, I mean, you know, it's everything together. And so when you're talking about the threats, of course, and there are great people in the military and in our civilian institutions that are looking at what the threats are out there with cybersecurity, and there's AI now to the fore as well, quantum computing and everything. And, you know, so there's a need for digitization of our military, which is happening now under the guise of the NATO, the NORAD upgrade. But which then, okay, you say, so what? So the so what is that you need a range of capability. And the range of capability that's going to be able to react to all these different threats. Now, can we have, you know, the same kind of range of capability that the U.S. does? No, we can't. But we can be a small, capable military that, you know, that is, first of all, job one is protecting Canadians, you know, and that goes from, you know, all the threats. The North, for example, you know, we have a border with Russia, frankly. You know, there we are. I mean, it's right there. And so we need a range of capability to protect our country. And then after that, then do we want to participate and be good international citizens and participate in our alliances, NATO, NORAD, of course, the UN eventually? I mean, you have to look at that. That's another piece. So a military that's able to do everything, it can happen, but it has, you know, it's obviously not going to be on the
That was our strength, though. I think the Americans, push comes to shove, well, obviously we'll never be on par with them as far as our military capabilities, but you drop an American soldier into anywhere in the world, and there's a lot of opinions that come up about the American soldier. They're seen as partisan. I mean, Americans are, and I love them. I'm very pro-American, but a lot of times, there's a reason why they don't want to talk to an American, but you put a Canadian in there, whether we had a blue beret on or not, you put, oh, Canadians, you know, they get along with everybody, so come and sit at the table. And so we were able to, I think, get into open doors and get in that, a bridge that Americans were not as able to as we were.
Canadians can use a softer touch.
That's right. And I think that diplomatically even, we are less offensive. And I think everybody would agree with that Canadians seem to be less offensive. So everybody's willing to talk to us. And how wonderful is that if there's only one seat left at the table and they'll choose a Canadian because we don't have any natural enemies, so to speak. We don't, you know, we've always proven to be, I think, good people in general, and, you know, and freedom and liberty and all of those things. So we're good.
We don't have a colonial history.
So, you know, and so,
exactly.
And I mean, this is just like anecdotal, but when I was in the Middle East, we were always trying to be very, very nonpartisan. So if we did something on the Israeli side, we had to be sure to do it on the Syrian side. And this got to be like it was very hard to keep track of. And I remember saying at one point, wouldn't it be nice if someday we could actually do this and have, you know, the Canadians and the Syrians and the Israelis and the Austrians, whoever else are with us. And without, in the blink of an eye, this very seasoned, you know, IDF soldier turned to me and said, that could only ever happen in Canadian mess. So there, you know, and it was kind of that feeling.
That was our reputation.
That was our reputation.
Was past tense.
Okay,
that's right.
What's changed in a fundamental way is not necessarily the caliber of the individual Canadian soldier, military leader, however we want to describe it. What has changed is the more global perception of what Canada represents. And there was always this sense that not only was the individual or group of individuals, not only were they incredibly competent and capable, but that the nation that they represented actually, stood for something, was on the right path, whatever that was at the time, and that they were going to get something done. There was going to be some useful contribution to whatever the issue of the day that was trying to be resolved. And that is, I would say, no longer the case, or if it is so rare and isolated. That,
Why? What's
well, I think we've lost our way in terms of who we are, what we stand for,
Right.
what we see as
I see
our
nothing.
role internationally. We have biased our political rhetoric so far towards the notion of social values and those ideas that we have lost sight of what is in our national interest, and we're trying.
Yes, well, we're not even sure that having a national interest is something that's worth pursuing anymore, right? I mean,
that
our
might
Prime
not be in
Minister
our
defined us
Well,
as not having a national
That's right,
interest. And
post-national.
he's obviously very internationally oriented. So it isn't even obvious that our leadership at the top level considers the nation state an institution that's worth preserving.
Well, if we're a post-national state,
Yeah,
frankly,
right.
you don't need to have citizenship. You don't need to really have a passport that recognizes you as Canadian. So our
Flag.
We
passport.
don't need national
Flag.
institutions.
You don't need national institutions, and you don't necessarily participate. And I mean, you look at our country. What potential we have?
Can't
The
see nowhere else
potential
to
we have.
go
First of all,
except
let's talk
going
about
up,
even
and I
just
think I already
our two
been up
languages. Okay, the fact that we have a Canadian, French and English kind of, those two official languages. When our officers or soldiers go off, and sailors and airmen and women go off to missions, a lot of them are able to speak both of them, and so they're able to diplomatically think of what that does. I mean, most nations that you participate with, our American friends, can't do that. We can sidle up to the French, to the Belgians, to in the NATO nations, even there. It's
In Africa.
In Africa, for
French
example.
Polynesia.
French Polynesia. There you go.
Bingo.
Vietnam.
And so look at the strength.
So you're
of that.
you're all making a case that Canada has a particular positive role to play independently, like in the world, and of course that Canada does have a history of that, and a very
doing?
effective history of that,
Stand up and
independent
doing
of,
nothing.
of the specific defense requirements of
Exactly.
Canada,
Exactly.
and that's part of what would you say, maintaining and promoting global peace, but also part of putting Canada out there as a credible nation state
it.
that should be taken seriously.
As a
and
player
is
that
willing
has
to
an
pull-
opinion and that's able to actually participate, not only
Yeah.
participate, but intervene when required. And
Right.
it's very difficult.
And let's go back to an earlier question that you posed to us in context, and I'm paraphrasing. Why is this important to Canadians? From a what's the
It's too
threat
easy.
perspective? And
Yep,
I'm not going to
yep.
sit here and list a whole bunch
Yeah.
of boogeymen, perceived or
Well, we could
or
list the
otherwise.
Chinese Communist
Yeah.
Party.
So yes, that's a
For
real
example.
threat.
There's one.
Yeah, definitely.
But I
Yeah,
think
or-
it's important for your viewers to understand that this is not a monolithic binary conversation. That this is a continuum of concerns. And I'm on the public record of saying, do I believe that somebody is going to attack Canada or invade Canada in a traditional military sense? I think the probability of that is extremely low. However, do I believe that other powers are going to use military capability to influence something halfway around the world or even in our own backyard that is in our national interest?
100%.
Absolutely.
Yeah, all the
And
time.
This
All
is
the time.
this is the naivete that concerns me, because we have traditionally seen the conversation about military capability in Canada through the lens of, we live in a fireproof house with no flammable materials immediately around us, right? Or whatever the saying is. But the reality is, no, it's not about our house. It's about our lifestyle. We enjoy, maybe not as much as we have in the last several decades, but we still enjoy an incredible level of privilege in our lifestyles, and that is dependent on a whole series of international systems. And those international systems are all under threat. They're under threat from a military perspective, they're under threat from a political perspective, they're under threat from an economic, they're under threat from a sociological perspective. And the more that we erode our ability to protect those systems, the more vulnerable we become, not to an invasion.
Well,
but it's
electronic invasion.
It is. It's
ideological
a virtual.
invasion.
It's a virtual or ideological invasion, as opposed to a physical attack against the nation. And this is why this is such an important conversation, and it is timely, as Mike said, because we really are seeing, arguably, you know, a generational situation where, you know, we're extremely vulnerable. We're not paying attention. We're not keeping track of what's happening in the big bad world. And we're so inwardly focused and understandably focused on our own domestic problems that we're losing sight of what's happening.
Well, we're also focused on weird domestic problems. Barbara, let's bring you in on this, because this really this came to my attention last year, let's say, and it's been mounting. It came to my attention because I came across a couple of articles in the primary Canadian Military Journal, and they were hypothetically academic articles, and I read them, and
gotta have this.
Well, so the problem, Mark, you listed a variety of problems with the Canadian military, and none of the problems you listed are the problems that the new Chief of Defense Staff is planning to, what would you say, address. The fundamental problem that she seems to be wanting to address is sexual misconduct in the military. Okay, now, so here's the problem I have with that from a diagnostic perspective. The first issue is, I'm sure there are instances of sexual misconduct in the Canadian military, but I'm not sure at all that there are more of those in the Canadian military than there are in the typical university, for example. And so, in fact, my suspicions are that there would be substantively less. And the reason I think that is because I know perfectly well that the Canadian military tilts towards the recruitment of highly conscientious people, and they're less likely to do those sorts of things. So I'm sure there's plenty of it, because we're putting young men and young women together in very stressful circumstances, and they're going to misbehave. And that'll also be true of some of the people who aren't, you know, mere recruits. But that's not the issue. The issue is it more prevalent in the Canadian military, and is that the crisis? And then the next issue is, let's say there is a problem. And then it isn't clear to me that there is, but let's say there is. Well, what's the solution? Well, the other thing I ran across in reviewing these papers is the solution is the same damn DEI solution that's being applied to everything. And so I don't see this as a diagnosis of what's wrong with the Canadian military. What I see it is an extension of the fundamentally leftist, radical, postmodern, neo-Marxist presuppositions that are destabilizing all our institutions, being focused on, you know, removing the patriarchy from the military, which I can't imagine a more woolly-headed or ill-advised diagnosis and solution than that, especially given all these other practical problems that you've described. So let's delve into that a little bit. So I don't know where to start with that.
So I could just start by saying, I think that with Jenny, or General Carignan, that was the job she's coming from. That was created, the chief culture and personal conduct that was being revamped. And that command was created to address, I think, the sexual misconduct things that were coming out of that. So it is my hope that she disbands that as her first job as the CDS, and I will happily go on record as saying that. So
you think there's any chance of that?
That I don't know. That I don't know. Because you know,
but just to stop you for a minute, your initial premise was wrong, I think.
Okay.
When you said she's going in there to promote that as CDS, as Chief of Defense Staff, I'm sure she knows as well as all of us that her job is to be the Chief of Defense Staff, to command the armed forces, to, you know, to make them operate.
Yeah, but that had been her job that she came from. You're absolutely correct. That was created. So, but it's this radical progressive agenda, and like it's been imposed right on every facet of Canadian life. And, you know, academics, some embraced it as, you know, academic, like their law did. But to impose it on the Canadian
Come on,
forces,
man. I'm
I shake my head.
dodging. I'm moving.
The warrior culture, we have to stamp it out. Oh my God, if there's one place you want to have a warrior culture, wouldn't it be in your Canadian forces? Wouldn't
Well,
it be
that
in your
is the
military?
question.
Like, seriously. Anyway, so dealing with the sexual misconduct. So you know, when it first came on, and I'm going to say,
Ugly bitch.
without hesitation, there are predators in every organization. And predators, they should be rooted out, prosecuted, and given the boot. Absolutely. Is every man that wore a uniform or even the majority? I never encountered it. So as I said, I joined in the early 80s. Women were allowed in the military police for just a couple of years. I was often the only woman in the truck, you know, in the tent, on the truck, whatever, and it didn't happen to me. Were there jerks? Absolutely. And there were women jerks that I worked with later too. But it just didn't happen. And so what bothers me the most is when I hear this is not that it happened, but first of all, they say that it happened and that nobody did anything about it and they had nowhere to turn. That I have a real hard time with, because I can tell you that if a bunch of times when an inappropriate remark was made to me, I don't know, about how I looked at my uniform or whatever, as I took that remark in and I thought about it, before I had a chance to respond, the guy next to me said, "Hey, buddy, that's not cool."
Right,
And that happened all the time. And that didn't happen just with Canadians, that happened with our allies. And I was very lucky to work with a lot of our allies. And it just wasn't, if you have no experience with the military and you read, you know, the legacy media and you see it, like, you know, you wouldn't want your child anywhere near that organization because it's this, you know, misogynist, toxic. Yeah.
Well,
and
you
it's
see
just,
that now. We all have friends who, you know, either their kids or as we get older, maybe grandkids, are considering the military. And you get this question, it's in our circle.
You in the Catholic Church.
Well, you know, is it safe?
Yeah.
It's gut wrenching. Your question, you can intellectualize the question, and then you have to.
That's also got to be radically demoralizing, especially the good people who aren't involved with this.
That's, you know, and it. So we look at what's happened. So, we're going to root them out. And what have we got so far? We've got 3 senior officers that are thinking off the top of my head, gentlemen who were they found guilty? No, they weren't. But the careers and, you know, of Art McDonald, Danny Fauquin, Steve Whalen are over.
And their families.
And the family circumstances. And what happened? Some historic weird event when everybody was drunk on a boat and there's no witnesses. But these men, they're done. And I think
well, drunk on a boat is also relevant, you know. So I studied antisocial behavior in relationship to alcoholism for like 15 years. And so one fact that you can lay on the table instantly is that if there was no drunk people, there would be virtually no sexual assault.
Agreed.
So if you were actually serious about sexual assault on university campuses or in the military, the first thing you would focus in isn't culture and it isn't personality. It probably isn't even the predators. It's probably alcohol.
So we addressed this like a long time ago. Like, you know, I've been out for a long time, but I remember we had, it was called SHARP, Sexual Harassment and racism prevention. And these courses were in the early 80s. And so it's not like this was, we haven't done anything about it. We've been going with the times since then and changing our culture. And alcohol was a big part of the military culture in those days. And that's changed. That started changing even with the younger, you know, when fitness became a thing kind of, and it stopped being like, but I can remember going to the mess and you had to drink and whatever. And that changed. So we have moved with the times. But
it doesn't mean these problems don't exist.
Yeah, of course.
But as you said, and you know, to Barb's point, how much of an emphasis and amplification do we want to put on the existence of those problems?
Well, we might want to first of all demonstrate that they're real. And the way you do that is by comparative analysis, and I don't see any evidence of that. So the problem of sexual misconduct is real. The problem of alcohol-fueled sexual misconduct is real. Is that particularly typical of the armed forces in Canada? I doubt it. You'd need overwhelming proof before you made that primary concern. Now, on the alcohol side, too, I have a question about that. You know, I was thinking about that a lot this week, because what alcohol does is it narrows your focus to the present. and it makes you opaque to threats, essentially. So it's quite fun in that regard because it allows you to be enthusiastic without any concern for the future. Now, the problem with that is you tend to act like a jackass. Now, but there's an advantage too. It's like, because I wonder about this, when you have men and women who are on the front lines and they're putting their life at risk and they've been there for like a week and a half. I used to think this about the oil riggers in Alberta too. They go off and they have a couple of days off and they want to blow off some steam. And so they have a riotous party. And riotous parties are where stupid things happen. But having said that, I don't exactly understand how much steam you do have to blow off in order to be able to tolerate the life that you're leading, that high stress, anything is possible at a moment's notice life. And so I don't know how much off-duty discipline, let's say, it's reasonable and realistic to insist upon. Now, you know,
way better.
I've already said I know what alcohol contributes to these sorts of situations, but by the same token, you know, it's like, how much do people need to let off steam? And so I'm kind of curious about what you think about that. You've been around men in those situations for a very long time.
And I'll say again, I mean, you're right. And it's whether it's in the officers' mess, or the private's mess, or the office Christmas party, that kind of stuff. But so I know, and there was a lot of the drinking went on, but I honestly never felt threatened, and and so you would be in a mess. I'm thinking up in the Golan Heights, for example, there's maybe 40 or 50, and there's three women up there, and I didn't see it. I saw them drinking too much, perhaps, and then out came the arguments over the Maple Leafs versus the Canadians, and singing the regimental songs, and somebody got, you know, when the karaoke machines came out, it was bad news, and then it was, but you were still, if you're on a military base, there's still regulations, right? The mess closes, everybody goes back, and you're sleeping in your quarters. And so I saw more sort of fist fights break out than I saw kind of anything with a sexual overtone.
And things have changed since then as well, by the way. I mean, you know, all our missions now are essentially, you don't drink. They're dry missions. Afghanistan was all dry, except when you got off the island, off the mission, and went into Kuwait or wherever. Ships are all dry now, right? I mean,
When they're at sea.
when they're at sea. So when they pull up into shore, then you have parties and you have so on and so
Right,
forth.
so that's been rectified.
So things have changed a lot. I mean, when I was commanding officer from 89 to 91, already started some young officers saying, well, no, I don't want to go to happy hour. In my day, you know, when I was a young officer, it was, you know, on Friday night, you go to happy hour, here's a beer, here's a cigarette, you're going to smoke, you're going to drink, and that's plenty. You know, I'm exaggerating, obviously, but by the time, you know, so early 90s, then, you know, young men and women were becoming more fit. I said, no, a glass of orange juice, and that'd be just great. And they, you know, it's 6 o'clock, I'm going home. That's it. You know, in the old days, we party till 11 every Friday.
So the evolution of I say generation.
Graceless, tarnished. What is thy business with these thrones? Godric the Golden. The twin prodigies, Mikola and Melania. General Radan.
Yep, all gone.
Praetor Rykard. Luna Princess Rani. Willful traitors, all. Thy kind are all of a piece. Pillagers, emboldened by the flame of ambition. Have it writ upon thy meager grave. Felled by King Morgoth, last of all kings. generations to rest.
I was ready too.
Evolution of these aspects of let's call it the organizational culture, because I know you want to talk about culture to some degree.
That was my fault.
They've evolved, and they've evolved as much because of the participants in the culture as they have from organizational dictum. You know, there's been a sense of, okay, we need to modernize this.
No, I forgot
but a lot of people are finding other outlets for that letting off steam, as you characterized it. A lot of it is, there is a lot of fitness. It's different. It's different as it is in society. It's different, but that doesn't mean it still doesn't happen. It doesn't mean
Oh, shit, it's lagging.
yeah, but there's a difference between getting drunk and doing stupid things and getting drunk and doing nasty and malicious things. And that's where it is hard in the premise here. How do you make that distinction? Well, you have to say, you have to establish expected norms of behavior, and those evolve
Damn.
over time. What was acceptable 30, 20 years ago is not necessarily acceptable, not because it's politically correct, but just because we've changed. So, you know, drinking at sea. I use that as an example. I was the one, in fact, that banned drinking at sea for a variety of reasons, including, and the way you characterized your previous research experience was, it was like deja vu. It was the senior non-commissioned members of the Navy at a particular board meeting who said to me, Admiral, we're telling you 99% of our problems are alcohol related. All this misconduct, you can bin it all into drunk. If they weren't drunk at the time, the chances of them having done whatever it was pretty slim to none.
So there's the, you know, they're my people. I am their leader, so I must follow them. This is what you were getting this from the troops.
So the senior leadership, the senior non-commissioned, they're telling me, we have a problem. You, admirals, wearing your big pants, to do something about it. So we said, okay, let's look at this. Let's study it to the best we can in the context of our own.
Oh, you see this nigga fight him.
And let's come up with some progressive approaches that didn't ban it entirely, because that would be reasonable and just silly. And it doesn't just accept the status quo, but says, okay, you know what? Drinking is seen as dangerous, first of all, because you're operating extreme. It's like drink. It would be using an oil rig analogy. They don't allow them to drink on an oil rig. Very good reef, so they can keep their hands right, or not kill somebody accidentally because they're drunk. So how about that as a thought process? And yes, so that evolved over time.
I think we also have to remember that the military are more generally conservative. So for change to happen, say it's the only thing harder than getting
crazy combo.
a new idea in the military mind is taking out an old idea. You know, and but it's really not slow.
So slippery.
Jokes. They're jokes. They're inside jokes.
And in fact, so you have to, but you know, you look at this evolution of alcohol and all that, and it's and so is there a big culture change required? I'm with Barbara. I think no. I think, you know, you need to make sure that people understand that you know that you have to, you know, respect others and in all kind of ways and everything, and you root out those predators. But
and you're not alone. That was the big thing. That's the hardest thing for me when I see on TV when something happened, a victim says this happened to me and there was nowhere to turn to, and I have a real hard time with that, because the military, okay, it's huge, it's a family. You've met people throughout your whole career, even if you've been 2 or 3 years, you've got people you were on this course with or trained with, and so your chain of command is not welcoming to your family. Let's say that, right?
Leadership. Barb, to your point, when you see these things, they are fundamentally failures in leadership.
Are you tired of feeling sluggish, run down, or just not your best self? Take control of your health and vitality today with Balance of Nature. With Balance of Nature, there's never been a more complete dietary supplement to ensure you have a wide variety of fruits and vegetables and meat. Balance of Nature fruits and vegetables, they freeze-dry them, turn them into a powder, and then they put them in capsules are completely void of additives, fillers, extracts, synthetics, pesticides, or added sugars. The only thing in Balance of Nature fruit and veg capsules are fruits and veggies. Right now, you can order with promo code Jordan to get 35% off your first order, plus you get a free bottle of Vibrant Spice. Experience Balance of Nature for yourself today. Go to balanceofnature.com and use promo code Jordan for 35% off your first order of merchandise, plus you get a free bottle of Vibrant Spice. That's balanceofnature.com, promo code Jordan for 35% off your first and third order, plus a free bottle of Vibrant Spice.
So you point out very, but I'm wondering too, like, there is a cultural element to that, of course, but there's also a personal element. Like, I'll give you an example. Daughters of alcoholics are much more statistically likely to marry alcoholics. Now, we don't know why that is. We don't know if they find men who are drinking, and because they're accustomed to that, they pick those men, or we don't know if they covertly reinforce their husbands for drinking to the point where they become alcoholics. But it's such a widespread phenomenon that if you're doing genetic analysis of the transmission of alcoholism, you have to take into account this issue of assortative nature. Okay, so now, the issue is, was there a manner in which you conducted yourself personally that made you less likely to be the target of such unwanted attention? That might have to do with alcohol.
Low-key kind of easy.
And then also, is it reasonable to assume that your experience is emblematic of the experience of females in the military, or were you, for whatever reason, protected personally or more fortunate?
That's how she walked off.
So first of all, women that join the military, I think, tend to be, well, certainly in my time, they tended to be, like, not everybody's going to want to join the military.
Yeah.
So I think that maybe they're a little bit more outspoken. I don't know. I would say that, like, it didn't happen to me, but I didn't see it happening around me. And I was close to a lot of women in the military, and nobody...
And you were there early.
Yeah, but nobody came, like, even at the end of my career.
Just as I.
Damn, whooped his ass. Too easy. Nice.
Hello again, old friend. Allow me a moment to converse with you. You are unable to enter the Erd Tree, no? Prevented by the mantle of barbs. The thorns are impenetrable, a husk of the Erd Tree's being that spurns all that exists without. The only way to stand before the Elden Ring and become the Elden Lord is to pass the thorns. My purpose serves to aid in that very act. So I'd like you to undertake a new journey with me to the Flame of Ruin, far above the clouds, upon the snowy mountaintops of the giants. Then I can set the Erd Tree aflame and guide you down the path to becoming Elden Lord. I wish to journey with you once more to the flame then and guide you. Shall I turn your runes to strength? Let my hand rest upon you for but a moment. Share them with me. Your thoughts, your ambitions, the principles you would follow.
How do I get over there? Eddie, fuck.
When I was in NDHQ and like nobody would, I didn't hear about people saying this happened to me, what are we going to do about it? I think that the majority of women, it didn't happen to. And I think that the ones that did, yes, absolutely, they should, seek justice. But I also think that to say there was nowhere to go, I mean, you had your peers, you had the Padres. We have Padres that doors open all the time. You had medical staff, you had somebody that you worked with on a course. There were so many avenues that you could go through. Yeah, the physical training guys and girls. Like there were so many places that you could go for help. I find it astonishing when I hear this happened to me and it happened to me over and I had nowhere to turn to. That I really have a hard time with that.
So now, when you entered the military, what response did you get from the men?
Well, okay, so we do, and we put, okay, so nowadays you wouldn't have, like our lockers in the military police, like it wasn't a changing locker, but we kept our gun in there and like, our ticket books and all that sort of stuff. So you were never there undressed, but so we were all together, men and women. And there wasn't one locker that didn't have Miss January or whatever, in the thing. So nowadays that's just not cool. And so I responded to that by getting, remember, Bill Reynolds and Cosmopolitan, and I put him up in my locker. And we never had a problem with that again. The guys said, I'm not looking at that every day. So, well, and then that was it. And then, and it took a while, but I think that I don't think it was hostile. I think it was more, they didn't know how to act. I had a flat tire on my police car in Edmonton. You know how cold it is there? A flat tire. Nope, I know how to change tires, so I'm changing the tire. And I do see another military police car go by. Fine, change tire, I come in, the usual ribbing, you know, just like the guys would get. But this one military police corporal, he's waiting. He's waiting at the end, and he says, Barbara, he said, listen, he said, I drove past you today. I said, yeah, I saw you. And he said, I didn't know what to do.
Right.
He said, if you'd have been nice, I would have stopped.
Yeah, right.
But I thought you were going to say, oh, you think I can't do this?
Yeah,
Then
right.
I didn't know what to do. And I said, next time, stop the effing car, kind of thing. And we were cool after that, right? But that was the kind of things that they didn't really know what to do. They didn't really know how to do it. And this idea that men and women are interchangeable, I have a hard time with that too.
Okay, so I want to delve
really
into that.
have a hard time
All right,
with that. So go ahead.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that. So I might as well get myself in trouble right off the bat. So I spent a lot of time in academia, and I can see it tilting in the manner that it has tilted, the same manner that, in principle, the military is now predetermined to tilt on the cultural side. And I've been trying to sort out exactly why that is. Now, I've seen a lot of infantilization of people. A lot. Like way too much. And infantilization of faculty, for that matter. And then I wonder, like, if you introduce women en masse into an administrative institution, to what degree does that infantilize the situation? And I don't know the answer to that. Neither does anyone else, because we haven't introduced women en masse into administrative institutions before about the last 60 years. So we have no idea exactly what's going to happen. So there's going to be female social pathologies, just like there are male social pathologies. And infantilization seems to me to be a very high probability outcome. So now, and that's definitely not something that you want in the military. It's bad enough in academic institutions. And you just also pointed out that you don't believe that men and women are interchangeable. Now, I have a gut reaction to women in frontline combat. Now, for a variety of reasons, I think the primary reason is the consequences for women if they get captured as prisoners of war. That just doesn't seem to me to be, that's not an acceptable situation as far as I can see. I could be convinced otherwise. But you've been in the military a very long time, and you believe that there are intractable differences, let's say, between men and women.
Absolutely.
And I obviously like you gentlemen's opinion on this too. Women are half the workforce, and they're half the intellectual power, and being able to capitalize on what women have to offer is a major deal. We know that more educated women have more educated children. That's not true for men, by the way. So it's female educational attainment that predicts children's educational attainment, not male. And we know that countries that educate women and that make their inclusion in the workforce a priority are much more likely to thrive economically. So we know all that. But we don't know exactly how to integrate men and women, for example, into the military, because that's a tough nut to crack. So what is your experience talking about that? What role can women play well or better even, possibly?
I think that, so women, when I joined, I think we were coming up on 10%. And since then, this 25% women has been bandied about forever. And we maxed out at, I think, 15, 16% where we are now, and we're not getting any more than that.
So it's like engineering in that regard.
So what do I think? So I think that women, there's a role for women, but to say that you can interchange, you can take the guy out of the battalion off the ship and just replace him with a woman, that's not always true. And I believe that. And I think for me, it comes down to meritocracy, specific
work trade
that you have. So military police, here we go again. So we have living quarters on the base. So there's children, there's women, wives, whatever, and things happen. So we still had the airborne school. So when there was a bar fight, for example, and there was a lot of them, I am quite certain that if we are honest with each other, you are rather going to have one of you as a partner going into a bar fight than me. Mm-hmm. And you know what? Me too.
Right.
Thank you. I would rather not have another woman as a partner. However, we also had things like a sexual assault or an abusive relationship or a child who was assaulted. And then in that instance, I'm pretty sure that you guys might rather have me come to make the first to talk to the woman who's been child who's been abused. And so there's room for both. And this,
Unlock.
What about on foreign relations and diplomatic? Are there roles that women
Dog
play in
ain't
the
even do
military?
shit.
yeah, and unfortunately, though, we go there assuming that everybody's as wonderful and free as we are. So,
Yeah.
So, you know, I went to Syria. I was negotiating the $1 million contracts, and they wouldn't talk to me because I had a UN uniform on, and I was a woman.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it was, you know, so I had to go get my little driver, my 18-year-old Newfoundland driver, and he had to come in and he's, ma'am, I don't know if I should be signing these, just sign them. And, you know, because they refused to deal with us.
Right.
And so you're still
Okay,
dealing
so
with
that's
that.
a disadvantage.
Yeah,
what
that's
about
a
on the
different-
advantage side in foreign relations and on the battlefield?
I would say in foreign relations, I would say that we were a novelty still to a lot of different, like the Poles, the post-Italian, we were a bit of a novelty, even in the Austrians. And so they would, and men traditionally, and I'm going to say this, I'm going to make a blanket comment that the majority of men are still there, kind of the gentleman, like they're going to want to pull out the chair for you, not sit down. And so I mean, if you were smart, you use that to your advantage. I know I did. And it was, you know, and then I think that women, they calm things down. Like if there's an argument going on and there's, you know, the Austrians are fighting, we had the Austrians and the Poles were always fighting. Then when the women came in to sit down, the men sort of toned it down because they were gentlemen inherently. And so that was an advantage for women.
When you look at a problem or you have an issue, and whether it's a, you know, a strategic, operational, tactical issue or whatever, you will want to get as many opinions as possible. You want to consult if you have time. Let's say if you're trying to take a hill over, you sometimes don't have time. But if you're considering an issue, a problem, a challenge, it's always going to be good to have different ways of viewing that issue and getting different opinions on how to solve that issue. Having women in the forces is a strength. I mean, there's no doubt about it. The issue that comes to what you're talking about, combat roles, you know, on a ship, in a submarine, fighter aircraft. I mean, I think it's very difficult. But in my view, if a woman wants to do it, who the heck am I to say she can't? If she meets the standards, that's just great. But she has to meet the standard. Now, what I do, the second order effect of that, though.
So what do you do when people say, well, if the standards discriminate against women, then the standards are sexist? Because that would certainly be the case for upper body strength, for example, generally speaking.
They drop
but there are jobs where you need the upper body
I know.
strength, okay? So to be in the Armored Corps, to lift a, you know, 100-pound, you know, bullet round, you know, you need the strength to be able to do it. I'm sure in the Navy there's lots of those kinds of jobs, but what I was going to say is that the second order effect is on the leadership. Now the young sergeant and the young lieutenant now has to command, you know, his section of 10 people, some of which are women, and it's now he or she has to have, and sometimes it's a she that's going to command that, has to have a different kind of approach. You can't be the old sergeant of the old days. Push-ups and that's it, you know, and dirt bag and all.
Yeah.
It's a different story. So those are challenges that now I never had to. I got out 15 years ago, so I never actually, you know, was faced with that. But it's a different challenge.
See, I see this, and at the risk of oversimplifying, kind of like a Venn diagram. And you've got what I would describe as technical skills of whatever the occupation. Then there are the physical requirements, which might be as much what we would call in our business environmental. So they're different. When you're in a tank or you're in it's different than being on a ship. But there are physical requirements that are there, and then there's this. I would argue ill-defined sense of the social part. I'm just going to put social in quotes because I'm not educated in that regard. But it's all this other stuff, and it's where all the other stuff gets weird.
You're throwing these bitches far.
People either don't know how to deal with it, and you can have all the training you want, but there are realities to these social dimensions. They're not just gender specific, but there are social aspects to how militaries function. And some people are very skilled at those, maybe not as physical, very technical skilled. Other people are very strong.
Guess we're fighting now.
Very
All these
technically
motherfuckers.
skilled, but have social, and I don't know, it's a very, I go back to, none of these things are, in my view, none of these things are as black and white.
No, they're,
Some-
well, they're not.
They're
Well,
very
so-
complex issues.
Well, so for example, you mentioned that the Canadian military's topped out at about 15% females, and that's quite intractable. Okay, so exactly the same thing is the case among engineers in the Scandinavian countries. They've gone farther than any other countries on the planet to equalize gender opportunities. But there are intractable differences on the engineering side and on the nursing side. Okay, so now you might ask why that is. Now, men and women are pretty much the same in terms of raw cognitive ability. The male curve might be a little flatter, so there might be more extreme male geniuses and males who have cognitive problems. There's some debate about that. Men and women are about equal in conscientiousness, which is the next best predictor, say, for administrative, managerial, and military jobs. But men and women differ radically in their interests. It's the biggest difference between men and women. Men are much more likely than women to be interested in things, and women much more than men to be interested in people. And that's a major determinant of occupational choice, and it really stands out in the difference between engineers, thing-oriented, and nurses, people-oriented. And so, given the nature of the military, the engineering-like nature of the military, the probability
Still
that
no grace.
without undue force, we're going to get to 50% women strikes me as zero. Now, and the idea that the ideologues have, that's a cultural issue, is nonsense. Because the other thing that's been demonstrated in Scandinavia, this is so cool, actually rank ordered nations by how egalitarian their social policies are. Okay, now you look at them in terms of differences between male and female in occupational choice. The biggest differences are in the most egalitarian countries. So if you free women and men up so that there aren't systemic barriers to their movement into an occupation, the occupational differences magnify, they don't decrease, right? And I think that's unshakable finding, right? So there's no amount of cultural gerrymandering that's going to bring women up to 50% in the military. It's a foolish goal, and it's based on a misapprehension of how human beings function. The ideologues think we're all socially constructed, and that's nonsense. If you flatten the playing field, men and women maximize in their differences. So, and that's what you'd expect for people who are pursuing their destiny freely and in accordance with their own interests. And it does seem to be interest. We don't exactly know what interest is, you know, from a scientific perspective, why women would tilt towards people, you know, except broad.
Nurturing, the nurturing
well, yeah,
thing, right?
right. But we don't know how that manifests itself, say, in day-to-day choices, exactly.
Which is, I find it ironic in some respects, because if you were, from an insider's perspective, if you were to characterize the military, we small in theory,
Fuck the horse, nigga.
we would describe ourselves as a people-centric organization.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure, there's a lot of stuff, a lot of things, a lot of kit.
Well, it's fraternal.
Right, and so,
Okay.
you know, I was quite struck by what you said.
Yeah, well, I think
because
there's a difference between...
we're doing something fundamentally wrong.
No, I think there's fraternal hierarchy and there's community of care, and I don't think those are the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah. So men can organize themselves, but when men organize themselves, they organize themselves into hierarchies, right? And so that's not a community of care exactly.
The best leaders, I think, obviously will have care for their people.
Yeah.
I mean, and that whole nurturing thing, I think, is not just the part of the women, but you're right, perhaps, you know, what do you call it?
With men, it comes in mentoring.
Right. It comes in mentoring, and I think the best leaders who care for their people and, you know, want to, you know, see them do well. And I always describe, you know, sometimes being in charge and being with your team. There's I can describe it as love, actually.
Yeah.
You know, and I loved my people that I commanded them and that I had in my group. And you know, sometimes people are kind of, you know, love. Yeah, well, it's a kind of love. You want to hug them. You want to, you know, keep.
So I talked to Jocko Willink, who's a Navy SEAL, and we've talked 3 or 4 times. And Jocko he's about like 3 feet thick. He's like a man's man, that's for sure. And Jocko wanted to be a soldier from the time he was like 3. You know, he's blowing things up when he was 3. And he told me quite frankly that, you know, he was a pretty rough adolescent and he could have taken a criminal pathway. But he went to the military, and one of the things that he found very rapidly was that opportunity to mentor was the best thing he'd ever found in his whole life. And that ethos of care among men does seem to make itself manifest in that mentoring. And I think that's I hope my people do well is different than I want to protect my people. Right. I mean, you do want to protect them, but it's not the same emphasis, right? There's an encouragement emphasis in that that's, I think, more characteristic also of the role men play in a family, right? Because men are, for example, men specialize in rough and tumble play with their kids. It's rougher, and it's more encouraging. It's less sheltering and nurturing.
And so the mission is important too, though, right? Like when looking after your people or doing our number one priority has to be the mission. So whatever your mission is, and so sometimes, you know, you're gonna have to send somebody home because they're not great guy, you want to look after him or whatever, but the mission comes first. And those are decisions then that the nurturing goes out the window, whatever the hierarchy, it's the mission is the most important.
And that's a rough one.
That is a tough one.
And that goes back to something you said a while ago with respect to, again, I'm paraphrasing, there's a tension between the desire to do all of these progressive things and the fundamental purpose of the institution. The institution is mission focused. If it's not mission focused, then why do you have it? Militaries exist to fight. Okay? If you define it to do something else,
or to be intimidating enough to make fighting unnecessary.
Well, yeah, exactly. That they're a deterrent. And so this notion, and you said it earlier, Barb, you know, it's like, well, you can't have both. You know, the warrior culture is in and of itself, and we have this on record, and we have very prominent Canadians who have written reports saying that this is the heart of the problem. Well, hang on. Well, okay, time out.
The mission is the heart of the problem. That's a problem.
Well, it's how there may be a whole bunch of issues around how things are being done. I'm open to that conversation. But the notion that this is at its primordial level a fundamental problem, then you're not talking about a military. And this goes to some
or a country.
I know you want to get in there.
No, but I really think you've hit the nail right on the head here. You've talked. Here's the problem: is that we have now put more emphasis on all those DEI principles in the military, and I think they've been. By the way, they've been, you know, it was really her idea, but I'm using it. That it's been forced on the Canadian forces, the military, by the government. This progressive ideology and radical progressive ideology that this government and you know, I'm not here to talk politically, but that's what I think has happened. And so the forces are having to react to that, and unfortunately that has taken priority over military effectiveness, military operational capability. And even though a lot of our leaders are trying to stay focused on that, people like, you know, our commander of the Canadian Joint Operations Command, you know, he's focused on operational capability, and he's forced to react to all this DEI business.
And teamwork. I mean, the military, it's a team. And so, and yet now all of a sudden the emphasis is on the individual. You know, and you don't even look like and I think, what is wrong with looking like the uniform should be uniform? Like, you don't, the guy for the Montreal Canadiens, I'm going to wear my away uniform tonight. I'm going to wear my home uniform. No, you're all going to wear the same uniform because we're on the same team. And so we've gone away from that. And now we've taken, you know, meritocracy out so that we can fill these imaginary quotas of, what is it, 0.03 or 3.2% of the population. We need to have a representative of this. Well, I don't know about you, but a $30 million jet, I want the best person to fly it. I don't want because he fits this quota, or she or they, I guess, whatever it is, they fit this quota. And how then are you going to feel when you are the best pilot, but you don't get chosen because you don't fit.
Properly demoralized.
You don't fit the DEI, you don't fit a certain quota, you don't fit. And okay, for as long as we've been around, 71% of the Canadian military are white males. They are our warrior cultures. They are the guys who, you know, roughneck, whatever you want to call it, the farmer's sons, the fisherman's sons, the guys, you know, and they join the military. And so and we'd spend not a penny recruiting to these guys.
It's worse than that, by the way. It's worse than that. We know that the best predictor on the personality side for military prowess is conscientiousness. Okay, conscientious people are meritocratic based, right? That's their hierarchy of value. So if you're trying to get conscientious people into the military, which you need to do if you're going to have a military, then the best way to dissuade them is to set up an anti-meritocratic operation, because they can't stand that. They're the guys that are going to want to go into the military and incrementally improve so they can advance forward through the ranks in a dutiful, patriotic, orderly, and industrious manner. That's conscientiousness.
Yeah.
And that uniformity, it's the same with business suits. Like the idea was, because a business suit is a modified military uniform, the idea was to signal that you're putting aside your own individual idiosyncrasies for your fellow platoon members, let's say, and the mission, right? And so it's not like you're trivial, because you're not, but your concerns are not the concerns of the platoon or the mission, and you wear the uniform to signify that. And if you can't make that sacrifice, if you're unwilling to, then, well, go do your own thing. It's not like we have a draft.
Well, and you know, you can demonstrate your individuality when you're in the military, but do it outside those times when you're wearing the uniform. You know, if you want to wear an earring when you're on leave, well, go, you know, enjoy yourself and all that. You know, that's got nothing to do with sexual orientation or any of this business. I'm talking uniforms specifically. And so all those things, forcing the DEI, the emphasis on individuality over team, that is having a huge impact on morale in the military.
Well, and how do you know that?
Because
recruitment would be one issue.
We've seen actually the Canadian Chaplain General has actually gone out and spoken. You know, all his padres have gone out, and he's come back, and he's, you know, I think this about a year ago that he said morale is shot. I'm getting information from
that in and of itself is a significant data point.
Well, I'm getting information. But you believe this is reliable?
Chaplain General.
It's a huge thing.
Okay. This is institutional. This has been typically a very private organization that is focused on spiritual well-being, morale, all of these extremely important but subjective aspects of the institution, to go public and say,
when he writes a report to the Chief of Defense Staff,
we
this
have a
is
problem.
A big friggin' deal. On top of that, I'm getting, you probably do as well, from former or serving officers and soldiers who write to me and say, hey, listen, you know, morale is horrible. There are organizations now run by veterans, young veterans, who kind of tell them, you know, tell all those serving who can't speak out publicly, but they want to gather the information. And the information I am getting right now is that morale is shot. One of the reasons is because they see our senior leaders, serving senior leaders, not fighting back against this process that the government is forcing on the military.
It takes out their faith in the leadership.
So it takes out their faith in the leadership. They're saying, holy crap, you know, and okay, you're going to have the odd one who likes to have his hair long, fine. But, you know, when I joined, I had my hair down to my shoulders. I had my, you know, haircut. I got a buzz cut and everything. And
plus, it was understood. They're not seeing public support. They're not seeing. They're not seeing overt signals from the political leadership that what they do actually matters. Right. Because the political leadership is focused on those other metrics.
The importance of service. Okay, so when the Prime Minister and Minister Blair brought out the defense policy update, you read what the Prime Minister said. Did he at any time in that speech talk about the importance of service, the honor of serving your country, that it's a great place to actually, you know, do something for yourself, but also for others and so on.
The fundamental purpose, why the armed forces.
Again, those are all conscientiousness-related virtues. Well, so here's something interesting on the political side. So
To play Fallout London, you need to own Fallout 4 and all of its DLC packs. That's easily acquired by purchasing the Fallout 4 Game of the Year Edition, which includes all of Fallout 4's DLC. If you already own Fallout 4 and the odd one or two DLC packs, you'll need to purchase what you're missing. This is the full list of everything you need to own. Need to downgrade Fallout 4, you'll also need the Fallout London mod itself. This is available to downgrade Fallout 4 to make it compatible with Fallout London. More on that later in the video, but it will require an additional tool to download. On top of all that, you'll also need the Fallout London mod itself. This is available to download from GOG using the GOG Galaxy launcher. Fallout 4 for PC is available on both Steam and GOG. Fallout London can be played using either version. Sorry, the Epic Game Store version is incompatible, but if you are buying Fallout 4 on PC for the first time specifically to play Fallout London, we recommend buying from GOG. Why? Because the installation process is much simpler than the GOG The Year Edition and the Playboy. Fallout 4 on Steam compatibility issue was impacted by the version of the game to work. Where GOG Galaxy only allows the older version to be downloaded to ensure compatibility with mods, Steam automatically downloads the next-gen version of Fallout 4. As such, you'll need to force Steam to download an older version of Fallout 4 to play Fallout London. To install Fallout London using a Steam version of Fallout 4, you'll need to access the old 1.10.163.0 version of Fallout 4 Game of the Year Edition. The easiest way to do this is by using Team Folon's Downgrader tool, which is available from Nexus Mods. A link to the downloader will be in the description of this video. If this is your first time modding a PC game, then this is probably your best option. After downloading, run the Fallout London Downgrader.exe app. This will open a window that will ask for you to select the install path. Click the folder icon to the right of the window and search for where Fallout 4 is installed. By default, that's this path. The next window will ask you to log into your Steam account. This is so the Downgrader tool can access the older versions of the Fallout 4 files and install them to your system. Enter your Steam username and password, and then follow the prompts to authorize the login via SteamGuard. If you're uncomfortable with logging into your Steam account via the tool, then you can manually downgrade Fallout 4. We'll get into that in the final portion of this video. With your Steam account logged in, the Downgrader tool will begin the process of installing the correct version of Fallout 4. This will take a long time, so you'll need to be patient. When the process is complete, hit Finish to exit the tool. With the freshly downgraded version of Fallout 4 ready, you now need to install Fallout London.